The bitter winter wind howled through the gaps in Zara Flynn's cabin as she clutched the blood-stained sheets to her chest, tears streaming down her face. It was the third time in 2 years that her hopes for motherhood had been washed away in a tide of crimson, and she wondered if God himself had forsaken her dreams in this unforgiving corner of Nevada territory. Genoa, 1878. The smallest settlement in Eagle Valley had grown from a trading post to a proper town over the past 2 decades, but it still clung to the edge of civilization like a barnacle on a ship's hull. The town nestled between the Sierra Nevada mountains and the vast desert expanse beyond, serving as a waypoint for those traveling to Virginia City's silver mines or California's promised lands. Zara had come west as a bride at 19, full of hope and dreams alongside her husband Thomas. 5 years had passed since then, and while they'd built a decent life running the town's only boarding house, the one thing Zara desired most remained elusive. Now, at 24, each month brought fresh disappointment and deepening despair. "You need to rest," Martha Wilson, the town's midwife, said gently as she gathered her supplies. The older woman's face was etched with concern and something else, pity, Zara thought bitterly. "The bleeding has stopped, but you're weak. No work for at least a week." "I can't just lie here," Zara protested. "The boarding house, your husband can manage," Martha cut her off firmly. "Or hire help. You push yourself too hard, girl." After Martha left, Zara lay in the silent room, listening to the bustle of the boarding house below. Thomas would be checking in guests, serving meals, making excuses for her absence. He was a good man, devoted and hardworking, but lately, a distance had grown between them, a chasm filled with unspoken disappointments and shattered dreams. 3 days later, against Martha's orders, Zara was back on her feet. The boarding house needed her, and lying abed with nothing but her thoughts was its own kind of torture. She was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard the commotion out front. "We need a doctor," a gruff voice called. "Man's been shot." Genoa had no doctor. The nearest one was in Carson City, 20 miles north. Martha Wilson served as midwife and healer for most ailments, but gunshot wounds were beyond her usual scope. Zara wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to the front desk where Thomas was speaking with 2 trail-worn men supporting a third between them. The wounded man's head hung low, his hat obscuring his face, but Zara could see the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "Bring him upstairs," she directed, making a quick decision. "Room 3 is empty. Thomas, ride for Martha." The men maneuvered their wounded companion up the narrow staircase while Thomas grabbed his coat. "Are you sure about this?" he asked in a low voice. "We don't know who these men are or what trouble they bring." "I know they need help," Zara replied firmly. "Now go." By the time Zara entered room 3 with a basin of hot water and clean linens, the men had laid their friend on the bed. One was removing the wounded man's boots while the other paced nervously. "Stagecoach robbery," the pacing man explained before Zara could ask. "We work security for Wells Fargo. Outlaws hit us about 5 miles east. Brock here took a bullet meant for the strongbox." Zara approached the bed, getting her first clear look at the wounded man. Despite the pallor of his face and the sweat beading on his forehead, she was struck by his handsome features, strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, straight nose, and unexpectedly long eyelashes that any woman would envy. "I need to see the wound," she said, setting down her supplies. The man called Brock groaned, his eyes fluttering open. They were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "Madam," he managed through gritted teeth, "sorry to impose." "Save your strength," Zara instructed as she carefully unbuttoned his bloodied shirt. The bullet had entered his left side just below the ribs. No exit wound that she could see, which meant the bullet was still inside him. "What's your full name?" she asked, trying to keep him talking while she assessed the damage. "Brock Landry," he gasped as she pressed a clean cloth against the wound. "Pleased to make your acquaintance." Despite everything, Zara found herself smiling at his attempt at formality while bleeding all over her best sheets. "Zara Flynn, I'd say welcome to Genoa, Mr. Landry, but I imagine you'd prefer different circumstances." Martha arrived 20 minutes later, Thomas close behind. By then, Zara had managed to slow the bleeding and give Brock a small dose of laudanum for the pain. Martha took one look at the wound and her face grew grave. "That bullet needs to come out," she declared, "and I'll need help." Brock's companions volunteered, but Martha shook her head. "You boys look like you might faint at the first real sight of blood. I need steady hands." She turned to Zara. "You've helped me with difficult births. Can you stomach this?" Thomas protested immediately. "She's just recovered from," he stopped, a muscle working in his jaw. "She's not strong enough. I can do it," Zara said, meeting Martha's eyes. She deliberately avoided looking at Thomas. They both knew what he'd almost mentioned, her recent miscarriage, but it wasn't something they discussed openly, not even between themselves. The next hour was a blur of blood, pain, and precision as Martha probed for the bullet while Zara kept the wound clean and did her best to comfort Brock. The man remained conscious through most of it, his jaw clenched tight against screams that occasionally escaped as muffled groans. His eyes, when open, seemed fixed on Zara's face as if she were an anchor in a storm of agony. "Got it," Martha finally announced, holding up a misshapen piece of lead with her forceps. "Lucky man. Another inch to the right and we'd be burying you instead of patching you up." After Martha finished stitching the wound and left instructions for care, Brock's companions departed reluctantly. They had to report the robbery and continue their duties, but promised to return when they could. "I'll check on you later," Thomas told Zara stiffly before following Martha out. He hadn't spoken a word during the surgery, just watched from the corner with an unreadable expression. Alone with her patient, Zara began cleaning up the bloody rags. Brock watched her through half-lidded eyes, the laudanum finally taking full effect. "Thank you," he murmured. "You have gentle hands." "Rest now," she replied. "You need to regain your strength." "Been through worse," he said, his words slurring slightly. "Once took an arrow in the leg from a Comanche." "Is that supposed to impress me, Mr. Landry?" Zara asked, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. "Call me Brock," he requested, his eyes closing. "And no. Just making conversation with the angel who saved my life." He was asleep before Zara could respond, which was just as well. She didn't know what to make of this man or the strange flutter she'd felt in her chest at his words. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her the way he did, as if she were something precious and remarkable. The next few days fell into a pattern. Zara tended to Brock between her regular duties, changing his bandages, bringing him meals, and sometimes just sitting with him while he told her stories of his adventures as a Wells Fargo guard. He had been a cowhand before that, working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, and before that, a soldier in the war. "You've lived quite a life for someone who can't be much past 30, Zara remarked one afternoon as she checked his stitches. The wound was healing well, with no signs of the infection that so often claimed gunshot victims. 32 next month, Brock confirmed. "Started riding with my pa's outfit when I was 14, been moving ever since." He winced slightly as Zara applied a fresh poultice to the wound. "What about you, Mrs. Flynn? Have you always lived in Genoa?" "No, I came from Philadelphia 5 years ago when I married Thomas. He had family out here who'd written about the opportunities in the Nevada territory." She kept her eyes on her task, aware of his gaze on her face. "We bought this place with my dowry and what Thomas had saved from working the mines." "You're a long way from home," Brock observed. Zara secured the bandage and finally met his eyes. "This is home now." Something in her tone must have betrayed her because his expression softened. "But not what you expected." She should have been offended by his presumption, but instead she found herself answering honestly. "Is anything ever what we expect, Mr. Landry?" "Brock," he reminded her gently. "Brock," she conceded, gathering her supplies. "And no. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns." Thomas had been increasingly distant since Brock's arrival. He performed his duties at the boarding house efficiently, but spoke little to Zara beyond what was necessary. She told herself it was just the pressure of managing things while she tended to their unexpected guest, but deep down, she knew better. That evening, she found Thomas in their bedroom, staring out the window at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. Dinner's ready, she said from the doorway. Will you come down? I'm not hungry. He didn't turn to face her. Zara entered the room, closing the door behind her. Thomas, what's wrong? You've barely spoken to me in days. He finally turned, and the pain in his eyes took her breath away. I see how you look at him, Zara. Who? Brock? She shook her head, bewildered. I've been caring for him as I would any guest who needed help. No, Thomas said flatly, not like any guest. You smile with him, really smile the way you used to smile with me before. He didn't need to finish. Before the disappointments, before each lost baby had carved another piece from their marriage. That's not fair, Zara whispered, though a part of her recognized the truth in his words. Something about Brock's presence had awakened something in her that had been dormant for too long, a sense of purpose, perhaps, or simply the pleasure of being appreciated. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she knew well. None of it's fair, Zara, not what's happened to us. Not what I see happening now. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I love you, I've always loved you, but I can't keep watching you slip away from me. I'm right here, she insisted, squeezing his hands. Are you? Thomas searched her face. Because sometimes I think you left months ago, and I'm just now noticing. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow, had she withdrawn without realizing it. Each loss had hollowed her out a little more, leaving less of herself to share with the man she'd once crossed a continent to marry. I'm trying, Thomas, she said, her voice breaking. Every day I'm trying, I know. He released her hands and stepped back. I am too. But maybe our trying isn't enough anymore. He left the room, and Zara sank onto the edge of the bed, his words echoing in her mind. Was their marriage truly falling apart? And if so, was it her fault for finding comfort in a stranger's company instead of her husband's? The following morning, Brock was sitting up in bed when Zara brought his breakfast tray. His color had improved remarkably, and he was beginning to look more like the robust man she imagined he'd been before the shooting. I've been thinking, he said as she set the tray across his lap. It's about time I stopped imposing on your hospitality. Zara felt an unexpected pang at his words. You're hardly ready to travel. Maybe not far, but I can make it to the hotel down the street. I've been a burden on you and your husband long enough. So he had noticed the tension. Of course Brock Landry struck her as a man who missed very little. You're not a burden, she said automatically. And besides, Martha wants those stitches to stay in at least another week. Brock studied her face, his blue eyes unexpectedly serious. Mrs. Flynn, Zara, I don't want to cause trouble between you and your husband. She busied herself straightening items on his bedside table. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, he said gently. And while I'm grateful for your care, I won't be the reason for discord in your marriage. Zara straightened, meeting his gaze directly. My marriage is not your concern, Mr. Landry. It became my concern the moment I saw the way your husband looks at me and the way he looks at you when you're with me. Brock's voice was kind but firm. I've been on the wrong end of enough jealousy to recognize it. Thomas isn't jealous, Zara protested, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. We've been going through a difficult time. Brock nodded, not pressing the point. All the more reason I should remove myself from your home as soon as possible. Before Zara could respond, a commotion downstairs caught their attention. Heavy boots on the stairs, multiple voices, one of which she recognized as Thomas's, raised in alarm. The door burst open, and two men she'd never seen before stood in the doorway. Both wore dusty trail clothes and had bandanas pulled up over their faces. More alarmingly, they had pistols drawn. Well, said the taller of the two, his eyes cold above his bandana. Looks like our information was good. The Wells Fargo man is here after all. Brock's expression hardened, but he made no sudden moves. Whatever you're thinking, it's not worth it. The money's gone, turned over to the bank in Carson City days ago. The shorter man laughed, an ugly sound. We don't care about the money no more. We care about the fact that you killed our brother in that robbery. Your brother pulled a gun on unarmed passengers, Brock replied evenly. I did what I was paid to do. And now we're going to do what brothers do, the tall man growled, raising his pistol. Zara moved without thinking, stepping between Brock and the gun. Not in my house, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. You want to kill this man, you'll have to go through me first. Zara, no, Brock's voice was urgent behind her. Step aside. The gunmen exchanged glances. Lady, this ain't your fight, said the shorter one. Move aside or you'll get hurt too. This is my home, Zara insisted, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. And I won't let you murder a wounded man in his bed. A tense silence followed, broken by Thomas's voice from the hallway. They're not alone. Sheriff's got the place surrounded. The taller outlaw swore and moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Whatever he saw made him curse again. He's bluffing, I don't see no sheriff, but the moment of hesitation was all Brock needed. In a fluid motion that belied his injured state, he reached beneath his pillow and produced a small derringer. Drop your weapons, he commanded, or I drop you. The standoff might have ended in bloodshed if not for the actual arrival of Sheriff Davis and two deputies, alerted by one of the boarding house guests who'd slipped out during the commotion. Within minutes, the would-be killers were disarmed and in custody. You're lucky we got word these boys were asking about a Wells Fargo man in town, Sheriff Davis told Brock as the outlaws were led away. They've been causing trouble all through the territory since their brother got himself killed in that robbery. After the lawman departed, an uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Thomas stood in the doorway, looking at Zara with a mixture of fear, anger, and something else she couldn't quite name. You could have been killed, he finally said, his voice hoarse. What were you thinking, putting yourself between him and those guns? Zara had no answer that wouldn't hurt him more. The truth was, she hadn't thought at all. She'd simply acted to protect Brock, risking her life for a man she'd known barely a week. I should go, Thomas said when she didn't respond. I need some air. After he left, Brock let out a long breath. He's right, that was foolish, Zara, brave but foolish. Perhaps, she acknowledged, suddenly exhausted as the fear and tension caught up with her. She sank into the chair beside his bed, but I couldn't just stand by. Brock reached for her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she let him take it. Thank you, he said simply, though I'm not sure I deserve such loyalty. Everyone deserves someone willing to stand up for them, Zara replied, thinking of how few people had ever stood up for her. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, Zara knew with absolute certainty that her life had irrevocably changed. The realization terrified her. She withdrew her hand and stood abruptly. You should rest, it's been an eventful morning. Before she could leave, Brock spoke again. Zara. Just her name, but something in the way he said it stopped her at the door. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that meeting you has been the one good thing to come from taking that bullet. She didn't turn around, couldn't. Rest, Mr. Landry, we can talk later. The next few days passed in strained silence at the boarding house. Thomas spent most of his time away, supposedly attending to business in town, but more likely avoiding both Zara and their increasingly awkward situation. When he did return home, he slept in the small office behind the front desk, claiming he didn't want to disturb Zara's rest. Brock, meanwhile, grew stronger daily. He began taking short walks along the upstairs hallway, then down to the parlor, rebuilding his strength. True to his word, he made arrangements to move to the hotel, planning to leave as soon as Martha removed his stitches. Zara found herself caught in an impossible position. Her marriage was crumbling before her eyes, yet she couldn't deny the connection she felt with Brock. It wasn't just physical attraction, though certainly that existed. It was the way he listened when she spoke, the respect in his eyes when she shared her opinions, the absence of disappointment when he looked at her. On a crisp April morning, Martha declared Brock sufficiently healed to travel. You're a lucky man, Mr. Landry, she said as she gathered her medical supplies. Not many survive a wound like yours with no complications. I had excellent care, Brock replied, his eyes finding Zara's across the room. After Martha left, an uncomfortable silence descended. This was it, the moment they'd both been avoiding. Brock would leave today, and life would supposedly return to normal, though Zara knew nothing would ever be the same. I've settled my account with your husband, Brock said finally. Paid for the room, the meals, and a little extra for the trouble. You weren't trouble, Zara said automatically. A sad smile crossed his face. I think we both know that's not true. She busied herself straightening the room, unable to look at him directly. Will you return to work for Wells Fargo? No, he said, surprising her. I've had enough of riding shotgun on stagecoaches. Thought I might head north to Montana Territory. Heard there's good land available for those willing to work it. You want to be a rancher? Zara asked, trying to picture this restless man settled in one place. I've been moving most of my life, Zara. Maybe it's time to put down some roots. He hesitated, then added quietly, of course, a ranch needs more than just a man to run it. Her hands stilled on the blanket she was folding. What are you saying, Brock? He moved closer, careful to keep a respectful distance, but near enough that she could see the earnestness in his eyes. I'm saying that if you were free to choose, there could be a place for you in that future. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. You barely know me. I know enough, he countered. I know you're kind and brave and stronger than you realize. I know you deserve more happiness than you've found here. I'm a married woman, she reminded him, though her voice lacked conviction. Yes, Brock acknowledged, and I respect that. I'm not asking you to run away with me today, Zara. I'm just telling you that if things were different, if you ever found yourself in need of a new beginning, you wouldn't have to face it alone. Tears burned in her eyes. How had this man seen so clearly in weeks what Thomas had failed to see in years? That beneath her dutiful exterior was a woman desperate for purpose and belonging. I don't know what to say, she admitted. Don't say anything now, he advised gently. I'll be staying at the Carson Valley Hotel for a few days before heading north. If you want to talk about anything, you know where to find me. After Brock left, Zara wandered through the quiet house like a ghost. Thomas hadn't returned from town, and the few boarders they currently hosted were out for the day. The silence pressed in around her, heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled dreams. She found herself in the small bedroom they had begun preparing as a nursery after her first pregnancy. The crib Thomas had built stood empty in the corner, a fine layer of dust covering its rails. A half-finished baby blanket lay forgotten in the rocking chair where she had sat so many evenings, dreaming of the child who would never come. For the first time in months, Zara allowed herself to truly feel the weight of her losses, not just the babies who had never drawn breath, but the gradual death of her marriage, the fading of her hopes, the slow erasure of the vibrant young woman who had journeyed west with such optimism. When Thomas finally returned that evening, he found her sitting in the parlor, composed but resolute. We need to talk, she said before he could retreat to his makeshift bedroom. Thomas nodded, removing his hat and taking the chair opposite hers. He looked tired and somehow older than his 28 years. I suppose we do. Brock left today, Zara began, watching his reaction carefully. I know. He settled his bill this morning. Silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they'd avoided saying for too long. Are you in love with him? Thomas finally asked, his voice surprisingly steady. Zara considered the question honestly. I don't know, she admitted. I feel something for him that I haven't felt in a long time. Maybe it's just the novelty of being seen, really seen by someone new. Thomas flinched at that, but he didn't deny the implicit criticism. And us? What do you feel for me now? I'll always care for you, Thomas, Zara said gently. We've built a life together, but we've been drifting apart for a long time, even before Brock arrived. Because of the babies, Thomas said flatly. It wasn't a question. Zara nodded, her throat tight. Each time we pulled away from each other instead of drawing together. You stopped talking about it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and somehow we ended up living in the same house but completely separate lives. Thomas stared down at his hands. I didn't know what to say to help you. After the second time, seeing you in so much pain, his voice broke. I felt like I was failing you, Zara, like it was my fault somehow. It wasn't your fault, she assured him, her own eyes filling with tears. It wasn't anyone's fault. Sometimes life just happens. So what now? He asked after a long moment. Are you leaving me for him? The directness of the question startled her. I don't know, she answered truthfully. But I think we both deserve a chance at happiness, Thomas, and I'm not sure we'll find it together anymore. He nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting this answer for a long time. I sold the boarding house, he said, surprising her. The papers just need your signature. You what? Zara stared at him in disbelief. When? To whom? Last week. To Jacob Miller. He's been looking to expand his businesses in town and he made a fair offer. Thomas met her eyes steadily. I think I've known for a while that something was going to change, Zara. I just didn't know what form it would take. But where will you go? She asked, struggling to absorb this unexpected development. My cousin wrote from California. There's good farmland available in the Sacramento Valley. I thought I might try my hand at something new. He paused, then added quietly, unless you wanted to come with me. Start fresh somewhere else, just the two of us. The offer touched her, but Zara knew it was made more out of obligation than hope. I think we both know that's not the answer, Thomas. He nodded, resignation and relief mingling in his expression. The sale gives us each enough to make a new start, he said. Whatever you decide to do, whether it's with him or on your own, you'll have the means to do it. Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. Even now, at the end of their marriage, Thomas was thinking of her welfare. You're a good man, she told him. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. And I'm sorry I didn't know how to be what you needed, he replied simply. But maybe that's the point, Zara. Maybe we were never meant to be each other's final destination. The conversation continued late into the night as they untangled 5 years of shared life and made plans for their separate futures. By morning, a calm resignation had settled between them. The papers would be signed, the boarding house transferred to its new owner at the end of the month, and their marriage would end not with recriminations but with mutual respect and a bittersweet acknowledgement of what might have been. 3 days later, Zara gathered her courage and made her way to the Carson Valley Hotel. She found Brock in the small dining room, nursing a cup of coffee while reading a newspaper. He looked up as she approached, his face lighting with surprise and something more. Zara, he said, rising quickly to pull out a chair for her. I wasn't sure I'd see you again. She sat, acutely aware of curious glances from other patrons. A respectable woman calling on a single man was fodder for gossip in a town like Genoa. But for once, Zara found she didn't care what others thought. Thomas and I have decided to part ways, she said without preamble. He's moving to California. The boarding house has been sold. Brock's expression remained carefully neutral. I'm sorry, he said. I know endings are never easy, even when they're necessary. It was a long time coming, Zara admitted. Your arrival may have hastened things, but it didn't cause them. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of possibilities hanging between them. You mentioned Montana, Zara finally said, meeting his eyes. Is that offer still open? A slow smile spread across Brock's face, transforming his features. It is, he confirmed. But Zara, I don't want you making such a decision out of desperation or on impulse. Montana's a hard country, especially for a woman used to town life. I'm stronger than I look, she reminded him, and I've never been afraid of hard work. I know that, Brock said, reaching across the table to take her hand. But there's something else you should understand before you decide anything. Zara waited, a flutter of anxiety in her chest. The bullet did more damage than I let on, Brock said quietly. Martha thinks, and I've had other doctors confirm, that I won't be able to father children. The injury was too close to, well, he cleared his throat. I know most women want families, and you should know that's not something I can give you. The irony of his confession was not lost on Zara. After years of believing her own body had failed her, here was a man telling her his couldn't give her what she most wanted. But instead of disappointment, she felt a strange sense of relief. I can't have children either, she told him, the words coming easier than she expected. I've lost 3 pregnancies, and Martha believes I never will carry a child to term. It's why Thomas and I, she shook her head. It became a wall between us, understanding dawned in Brock's eyes. So that's what he meant, he murmured. What who meant? Zara asked, confused. Your husband Thomas. He came to see me the day before I left the boarding house, Brock explained. He said some things I didn't fully understand at the time, that you deserved someone who could see past what you couldn't give. That a real man would value what you could offer more than what you couldn't. Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. Even in his pain, Thomas had tried to secure her happiness. I told him I didn't know what he was talking about, Brock continued. But I assured him that in my eyes, you were the most valuable woman I'd ever met, regardless of anything else. And now, Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper, now that you know, Brock's grip tightened on her hand. Now I think perhaps we were meant to find each other, Zara Flynn. Two broken people who might just fit together perfectly. Over the next few weeks, as Thomas finalized the sale of the boarding house and prepared for his journey to California, Zara and Brock carefully navigated the complexities of their situation. They met daily but always in public, mindful of Zara's still married status and the town's watchful eyes. They spoke of practical matters, the land Brock hoped to claim in Montana, the skills Zara could contribute to building a new life there, the challenges they would face together. But they also shared deeper confidences, childhood memories, secret hopes, past regrets. With each conversation, the connection between them strengthened, evolving from attraction to something more profound. The day before Thomas was set to leave, Zara found him in the nursery they had never used, carefully wrapping the small crib in burlap. "Jacob's wife is expecting," he explained when he noticed her watching from the doorway. "I thought they might be able to use this." Zara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "It's a beautiful crib. You always were good with your hands." Thomas secured the last of the burlap with twine, then straightened to face her. "Are you sure about this, Zara, about him?" "I'm sure that I want to try," she answered honestly. "Brock understands me in ways I'm not sure you and I ever understood each other. Maybe that's not fair to say, but no, it's fair," Thomas interrupted gently. "We were young when we married. We thought love would be enough to overcome any obstacle," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I want you to be happy, Zara. I hope he makes you happy." "I want the same for you," she told him sincerely. "Promise me you'll write when you're settled in California. I'd like to know that you're well." "I promise." Thomas hesitated, then added, "I've left the divorce papers with Judge Osborne. He understands the situation. There won't be any difficulties." Divorce was still uncommon and often scandalous, but in frontier communities like Genoa, practical solutions sometimes outweighed social conventions. The judge was a pragmatic man who had known both Thomas and Zara since their arrival in town. He would ensure the process was as dignified and discreet as possible. "Thank you," Zara said, blinking back tears. "For everything, Thomas. I hope you find someone who can give you the family you deserve." He nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I hope you find the happiness you deserve, Zara, with or without children." The following morning, Zara stood with Brock at the edge of town, watching as Thomas's wagon joined the westbound stage headed for California. A chapter of her life was ending, but rather than the crushing grief she had feared, she felt a tentative optimism about the future. "You all right?" Brock asked, his hand warm against the small of her back. "I am," she realized with some surprise. "It's strange, but I am." They walked back toward town in companionable silence. Spring was giving way to early summer, and wildflowers dotted the hillsides surrounding Genoa. The air was sweet with sage and pine, the sky an endless blue above the mountains. "I've been thinking," Brock said as they neared the hotel where he was staying, "about Montana." "What about it?" Zara asked, enjoying the simple pleasure of walking beside him in the open air, no longer concerned with town gossip or appearances. "It's a long journey," he said thoughtfully. "Dangerous in parts, and while I have no doubt you're capable of handling whatever comes, I wonder if perhaps we should wait until after." He stopped, seeming suddenly unsure of himself. "After what?" Zara prompted, curious about this uncharacteristic hesitation. Brock halted, turning to face her directly. "After we're married," he finished. "If that's still what you want." Zara's heart stuttered in her chest. They had discussed a future together, certainly, but neither had explicitly mentioned marriage. "Are you asking me to marry you, Brock Landry?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I reckon I am, though not as eloquently as I'd planned. I had a whole speech prepared about how I never thought I'd settle down until I met a woman strong enough to make me want to stay in one place. And have I ruined your grand speech?" Zara teased, happiness bubbling up inside her. "Completely," he confirmed, taking both her hands in his. But the question remains the same. Zara Flynn, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I can't promise you an easy life, and I can't give you children of your own, but I can promise to love you, respect you, and build a life with you that's filled with purpose and joy. Tears blurred Zara's vision as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Brock's face lit with such genuine happiness that Zara felt her own heart might burst. He leaned down, kissing her gently in full view of anyone who might be watching their first public acknowledgement of what had been growing between them. I know it's soon, Brock said when they finally parted. After Thomas and everything. If you want to wait, I don't, Zara interrupted firmly. Life's too uncertain to postpone happiness when you find it. The divorce will be final in a month. We can marry then and leave for Montana before the mountain passes become difficult in the fall. 2 months later, on a clear July morning, Zara stood beside Brock in Judge Osborne's parlor, exchanging simple vows that bound them as husband and wife. The ceremony was small, just Martha Wilson and a few of Zara's friends from town as witnesses. But what it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in sincerity. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Nevada, I now pronounce you man and wife, Judge Osborne declared, beaming at the couple. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Landry. Brock needed no further encouragement. His kiss was tender but held a promise of passion that brought a flush to Zara's cheeks and caused Martha to clear her throat pointedly. Save something for the wedding night, the older woman advised dryly, prompting laughter from the small gathering. The celebration that followed at the local hotel was modest but joyful. Zara, wearing a simple blue dress she'd made herself rather than her previous wedding gown, found herself genuinely happy for the first time in years. The weight she had carried for so long, the sense of failure, the constant fear of disappointment had gradually lifted during her time with Brock. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Landry?" Brock asked as they shared a dance in the hotel's small dining room cleared for the occasion. The name, her new name, sent a pleasant shiver through Zara. "That I'm very lucky," she replied honestly, "to have found you, to have this second chance." "I'm the lucky one," Brock countered, his blue eyes warm with affection. "When that bullet hit me, I thought my luck had run out." Turns out it was just beginning. Their wedding night, spent in the hotel's best room, was a revelation for Zara. With Thomas, intimacy had eventually become a dutiful act, weighted with the pressure of conception and followed inevitably by disappointment. With Brock, there was no pressure, no expectation beyond mutual pleasure and the expression of their growing love. "You are so beautiful," he whispered as he slowly removed the pins from her hair, letting it fall in waves down her back. "I've been wanting to see you like this since the day I first opened my eyes and saw you standing over me with that basin of water." Zara laughed softly, her hands working at the buttons of his shirt. "You were half dead from a bullet wound. I doubt your first thought was about my hair." "You'd be surprised what a man notices even at death's door," Brock teased, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "Especially when the vision before him looks like an angel." Their lovemaking was gentle at first, mindful of the newness between them and the remnants of Brock's injury. But as their comfort with each other grew, so did their passion. For the first time, Zara understood that physical intimacy could be a joyful connection rather than a means to an end, a celebration of what they shared rather than a reminder of what they lacked. Afterward, lying contentedly in Brock's arms, Zara felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. "What are you thinking now?" Brock murmured, his fingers idly tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never knew it could be like this," she admitted, her cheek pressed against his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. "That I never knew I could feel this way." Brock tightened his arm around her. "This is just the beginning, Zara, just the beginning of our story." The journey to Montana territory proved every bit as challenging as Brock had warned. They left Genoa in early August, traveling by stagecoach to Virginia City, and then north by wagon train, joining a group of families and prospectors heading for the same region. The trail was rough, the days long, and the nights cold as summer gave way to early autumn in the higher elevations. but Zara found she thrived on the adventure of it all. After years of running a boarding house, the open country and changing landscapes awakened something in her spirit that had long been dormant. "You were made for this life," Brock observed one evening as they sat by their campfire, a little apart from the main group. "Most town women would be complaining about the dust and the discomfort, but you look more alive with each passing day." Zara smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "Perhaps I just needed to remember who I was before I became defined by what I couldn't have." They reached the Gallatin Valley in late September, just as the aspens were turning gold against the evergreen forests. The land Brock had described didn't disappoint, a fertile valley cradled by mountain ranges, with a clear creek running through the property he'd laid claim to through a former army contact. The cabin that awaited them was small and crude, built hastily by the friend who had secured the land on Brock's behalf. But it offered shelter as they worked to establish themselves before winter set in. Those first months were harder than anything Zara had experienced in Genoa, but also deeply satisfying. Each day brought new challenges: chopping wood until her hands blistered, learning to hunt and preserve game, weatherproofing the cabin against the coming Montana winter, establishing relationships with their nearest neighbors, a good hour's ride away. But each night brought the reward of Brock's company, their growing partnership, and the sense that they were building something meaningful together. Winter arrived with a vengeance in November, bringing snowdrifts taller than a man and temperatures that froze breath in the air. They were well prepared, having worked tirelessly through the autumn, but the isolation tested them in ways they hadn't anticipated. "Do you regret it?" Brock asked one evening as they huddled near the fire, a blizzard howling outside their snug cabin. "Coming here with me?" Leaving civilization behind, Zara considered the question honestly, as was her habit now. One of the foundations of their relationship had been complete truthfulness with each other, even when the truth wasn't comfortable. "I miss certain comforts," she admitted. "Hot baths that don't require hauling and heating buckets of water, fresh bread from the bakery, conversation with other women." She smiled, reaching for his hand. "But no, I don't regret it. This feels right, Brock. It feels like where I'm supposed to be." Relief softened his features. "I worry sometimes that I've been selfish, bringing you to such a hard country." "We decided together," she reminded him, "and I'm hardly some delicate flower you've transplanted against her will. I chose this life, I chose you with my eyes open." As winter gave way to spring, their hard work began to show results. The cabin expanded with a new room. A vegetative garden took shape, protected by a fence to keep out deer and other wildlife. Brock acquired a small herd of cattle and 2 sturdy horses, the beginnings of what he hoped would become a successful ranch. They also forged connections with the scattered community in the valley, attending barn raisings and shared meals when weather permitted, exchanging labor and supplies with neighbors who understood the importance of cooperation in such an isolated region. Zara found friendship with Sarah Jenkins, the wife of a rancher 5 miles downriver, and Grace Thompson, a former school teacher who had followed her husband west and now lived on the other side of the valley. "You know what the ladies were asking me at the quilting bee last week?" Sarah mentioned during one of her rare visits to Zara's cabin that summer. "They wanted to know when you and Brock might be expecting a little one." The question, though predictable, still had the power to sting. Zara focused on her needlework, carefully stitching a pattern into what would become a new shirt for Brock. "We won't be," she said simply. "Brock's injury, we can't have children." Sarah's face flooded with embarrassment. "Oh, Zara, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned it." "The ladies shouldn't be gossiping either." "It's all right," Zara assured her, finding that it truly was. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had dulled to a manageable ache rather than the sharp agony it once had been. "We've made our peace with it." Later that night, as she and Brock lay together in their bed, Zara recounted the conversation. "Does it still bother you?" she asked quietly, "knowing we won't have children of our own?" Brock was silent for a long moment, his hand making slow circles on her back. "Sometimes," he finally admitted. "Not for myself so much, but for you. I know how much it meant to you." It did, Zara acknowledged. For a long time, I thought being a mother was the only thing that would make me complete, that without children I had somehow failed as a woman. And now, Brock prompted gently, now I understand that life offers many ways to find purpose and fulfillment. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at his face in the dim light from the dying fire. You've shown me that, Brock. You've given me more than blood could ever give. The simple truth of those words settled into her heart. What she had with Brock, this partnership, this deep understanding, this life they were building together, was more valuable than the continuation of a bloodline could ever be. Brock pulled her down for a tender kiss. And you've given the same to me, Zara. A reason to build something lasting, a home that's more than just a place to rest between journeys. Their second year in Montana brought new developments. The small herd of cattle grew, supplemented by a few horses. Brock began training for sale. The garden thrived under Zara's care, producing enough vegetables to see them through the winter with some to share with neighbors. Most surprising was the arrival of Joseph, a 10-year-old boy orphaned when his parents' wagon overturned crossing a river during spring floods. The family had been on their way to Oregon, and Joseph was the only survivor. With no relatives to claim him and the nearest orphanage hundreds of miles away in Helena, the community faced a dilemma. We could take him, Zara suggested tentatively over dinner the night after they'd attended the parents' funeral, just until a permanent arrangement can be made. Brock studied her face carefully. This isn't just about Christian charity, is it? Zara shook her head, knowing he would see through any pretense. No, I've spent time with him these past few days. He's a bright boy, Brock, hard-working, and he's so lost right now. Taking in a child is a big responsibility, Brock said thoughtfully. And a temporary arrangement might just add to his sense of being adrift if we have to send him on later. I know, Zara admitted. But I keep thinking, what if we didn't send him on? What if he stayed with us? She hesitated, then added, permanently. Understanding dawned in Brock's eyes. You're talking about adoption. Is the idea so terrible? Zara asked, suddenly uncertain. They had never discussed taking in children, focusing instead on building their life together as a couple. To her surprise, Brock smiled. Not terrible at all, just unexpected. He reached across the table for her hand. You'd make a wonderful mother, Zara, and that boy could use someone like you in his life. Someone like us, she corrected gently. He needs a father, too. The decision wasn't made lightly. They spent several days discussing the practicalities and implications before approaching Joseph with the possibility of joining their family permanently. The boy, still grieving but desperate for stability, accepted with a solemn nod that nearly broke Zara's heart. You don't have to call us anything but Zara and Brock if that feels strange, she assured him as she helped him settle into the small room they'd added to the cabin the previous summer. Your parents will always be your parents. Joseph nodded, clutching the small bundle of possessions he'd salvaged from the wagon accident. My pa always said a man should be useful, he said quietly. I can work, I'm good with animals. We know you can work, Brock said from the doorway, but that's not why we're taking you in, Joseph. A family is about more than just what each person can contribute. It's about belonging together. The boy's eyes filled with tears that he tried manfully to blink away. I miss them, he whispered. I miss them so much. Of course you do, Zara said, sitting beside him on the bed and wrapping an arm around his thin shoulders. And you always will. But missing them doesn't mean you can't find happiness here with us too. That night, after Joseph had finally fallen asleep, Zara found Brock sitting on the porch, staring up at the star-filled Montana sky. Having second thoughts, she asked, settling beside him on the rough-hewn bench. No, he said immediately. Just thinking about how life takes unexpected turns. 2 years ago, I was riding shotgun on stage coaches with no thought beyond the next payday. Now I'm a rancher with a wife and a son. He shook his head in wonder. A son? Never thought I'd say those words. Are you happy about it? Zara pressed, needing to be certain. Brock turned to her, his face serious in the moonlight. Happier than I ever thought possible, Zara. That boy deserves a chance at a good life, and I'm honored to help give him that. But more than that, he took her hand, his voice thick with emotion. More than that, I'm grateful that you'll have the chance to be a mother after all. No one deserves it more. Tears slipped down Zara's cheeks as the truth of their situation settled around her like a warm blanket. This wasn't what she had imagined for herself when she journeyed west as a young bride. It was better, richer, more complex, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding rather than the naive expectations of youth. As summer gave way to autumn and Joseph became more integrated into their lives, Zara found herself reflecting on the twists and turns that had brought her to this moment. The pain of her losses in Genoa had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something different, a deeper appreciation for the family she had found rather than the one she had expected to create. Joseph brought new energy to their household. At first shy and wary, he gradually opened up, revealing a quick mind and natural aptitude for ranch work that impressed even Brock. He formed a special bond with the horses, showing a patience and gentleness that coaxed even the most skittish colts to accept a saddle. "He has a gift," Brock observed one evening as they watched Joseph working with a young mare in the corral. "Could be the makings of a fine horse trainer. He has your calm approach," Zara noted. "He watches how you handle them and mimics it perfectly." Brock's expression softened. "He called me Pa yesterday when we were mending the north fence. Just slipped out natural-like, and then he looked scared like he'd done something wrong." "What did you say?" Zara asked, her heart squeezing at the thought of Joseph's uncertainty. "Told him I was honored," Brock said simply. "And that he could call me whatever felt right to him." By the time winter closed in around them again, Joseph had become an integral part of their family. The legal adoption, facilitated by a circuit judge who visited the valley in late October, formalized what their hearts had already decided. "I never thought we'd celebrate Christmas with a child in our home," Zara remarked as she and Brock prepared for bed on Christmas Eve. They had splurged on small gifts for Joseph: a new knife, a book of adventure stories, a hand-knit sweater, and Zara had spent days preparing special treats despite the limitations of their frontier pantry. "Life's full of surprises," Brock agreed, pulling her close. "Most of them hard, but some of them wonderful beyond imagining." Joseph thrived as winter gave way to spring and then to the warmth of their third Montana summer. He grew inches seemingly overnight, his frame filling out with the healthy outdoor work and Zara's cooking. His initial reticence faded, replaced by a quiet confidence and occasional flashes of mischief that delighted both his adoptive parents. "You've done wonders with that boy," Grace Thompson remarked during a gathering at the community church they'd helped build the previous year. "When he first came to you, he was like a shadow. Now look at him." Zara followed her friend's gaze to where Joseph was playing a spirited game of horseshoes with other children from the scattered ranches and homesteads. His laughter carried across the churchyard, bright and uninhibited. "We've been good for each other," Zara said simply. It was true Joseph had filled a space in their hearts neither she nor Brock had fully acknowledged was empty. That evening, as the three of them rode home together, Joseph between them on his own pony, a birthday gift from Brock, Zara found herself overwhelmed with gratitude for this unexpected life. The setting sun painted the valley in shades of gold and amber, the first stars appearing in the deepening blue above the mountains. "It's pretty here," Joseph observed, following her gaze. "My pa was set on Oregon, but I think Montana's better." "It's home," Brock agreed, his eyes meeting Zara's over their son's head. The love she saw there, steady, undemanding, complete, was all the affirmation she needed. As their small ranch prospered and Joseph grew into a capable young man, Zara occasionally received letters from Thomas in California. He had established a successful orchard in the Sacramento Valley and eventually remarried a widow with 2 young children who, from his descriptions, brought him the family happiness he had always desired. Zara was genuinely glad for him. In one letter, nearly 5 years after their parting, Thomas wrote, "I sometimes think about how differently our lives might have turned out if we had stayed together, continuing in our shared disappointment. Now I understand that what seemed like our greatest failure was actually setting us both free to find where we truly belonged. I hope you have found as much joy in your new life as I have in mine. Zara shared the letter with Brock that night after Joseph had gone to bed. He's right, she said softly. What I once saw as my greatest failure led me to my greatest happiness. Brock took her hand, his expression solemn. You know, when I first told you I couldn't give you children, I was terrified you'd turn away. Most women would have. I'm not most women, Zara reminded him with a smile. No, he agreed, his voice husky with emotion. You're the woman who saw value in a battered gunman with nothing to offer but a dream of Montana. The woman who built a home and a family from the broken pieces life handed us both. He pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible, Zara Landry, more than blood could ever give. In the quiet Montana night, surrounded by the life they had built together, Zara knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. Not in the life she had once envisioned, but in this unexpected journey with the man who had taught her that family wasn't defined by blood but by the bonds of the heart. Outside, the stars shone bright and clear over the land that was now truly their home, a testament to the truth that sometimes life's greatest disappointments can lead to its most precious gifts.